Just before Uzi speaks, we're talking about pedagogy and course curriculum. And as we're talking about pedagogy and course curriculum, I was on my phone trying to see what Nasrallah was saying. So here we are, speaking about the pedagogy of the study of contemporary anti-Semitism in Oxford as scholars, and there's world leaders literally, openly, with the silence, acquiescence, and sometimes the support of people in other parts of the world, with a political agenda to create caliphates and to destroy Israel and the Jewish people. And we're in 2024. And it's difficult in some ways for us to even get on the academic map to examine this. So we have to be strong and resolute, and I think connecting and meeting people from different universities in different parts of the world, as much as these lectures are really important and the pedagogy is important, the outcomes are very important, I think meeting, having dinners, having coffee, meeting new people, discussing, being reinvigorated and connecting is just as important. So it's wonderful to hear the din of conversation and the energy in the room. So thank you. So Uzi's lecture, the title is here, and this man needs no further introduction. So we're happy you're here, Uzi, and the floor is yours.
Okay, so first of all, thank you so much once again. Let's just try to broaden up our scope and make sure we understand actually the Middle Eastern theater as a result of the 7th of October atrocities. Of course, we have started with that. Remember, we talked about the Gaza Strip. We talked about Judea and Samaria, or the West Bank. Soon it became clear that this struggle between Israel and Hamas is not the A and Z. You don't have to have a professional eye to realize that Hamas is tightly connected to something which is much bigger than that. And this would bring us to understand or to talk about we talked about that. Of course, this is the chart of Hamas. This is Hamas. I talked about it. This is the emblem. This is what we see here. Hamas is well connected to something bigger, and I dare say that if we would like to really understand what happened in the Middle East, geopolitically speaking, in the recent 4 decades, we have to move to 1979. That was the year where dramatic changes actually swept the region, the first of which was an Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty. The other was the Islamic Revolution in Iran. So basically, Egypt and Iran kind of switched roles with regard to Israel and the West. And what we did see here is something that was to change the Middle East to a large extent. This is an Air France plane landing at Tehran International Airport. The king, in Persian, Shah, is not there anymore. Just remember that Iran, or Persia, one should say, had been the home for kings or shahs for thousands of years. So basically, this is the end of monarchy in Iran, which by itself, this is something bigger than life. What we got now is Shi'i clerics coming back January 1979. On top of them, Imam Khomeini, which brings in kind of a tenet which is definitely anathema to Islam Shi'i. In Persian, it is being named or titled Vilayat-e Faqih. Vilayat-e Faqih, it means that the rule of the jurisprudent. Namely, we are going to create here an Islamic republic. Jamhuriya Islami, first of its kind in the Middle East, in the modern Middle East, and definitely when it comes to Shia. Now, to make a long story short, let's just make us understand or be aware of the uniqueness of Shia in the Muslim world. Iran has been Shiite from the beginning of the 16th century, before it was Zoroastrian. And basically you can find a continuum between Zoroastrianism to Shiism in many, many senses, in many, many respects. But Iran was the only Shiite state in the Muslim world, so to speak, when it comes to 1979 in terms of the ruling elite. Arab states, just let me remind you, were basically based from the beginning, almost all of them, on what you can call Sunni aristocrats, which were brought in mainly by the British. I don't have time to delve into that, but she is, historically speaking, and especially in the modern world, became actually a second driver, second best in the Muslim world. What we have here is kind of an outburst when a monarchical state, Iran, which is comprised of mainly 95% Shia Muslims, is carrying the banner of Islamic revolution and create kind of a state that would adhere to the notion of Islamic Republic. Of course, this is the ideology. What's the problem with this problem? I mean, what happened with this revolution? Since 1979, ideology was there. Very, very evident. But, you know, when we talk about the idea, it's not the only thing we should just pay attention to. We would like to see the apparatus, what these people have in mind, and side by side with compiling this Islamic Republic, there was another actually item that was embedded or well entrenched in the body of this revolution. In Persian it is called Sudur Ingelab. Sudur Ingelab means that I have to export the revolution. This revolution from the beginning was not to be confined to the Iranian perimeter, exporting the revolution. For that, actually, together with the Ayatollahs, Ayatollah, the hand of God, this is actually a Shia cleric. You know, we have many, many levels here. Khomeini depicted himself Imam Khomeini, which is the higher level actually a cleric could deal with. After Khomeini, we have now Ali Khamenei, and he is the supreme leader, and his title is Ayatollah Uzma, which is Grand Ayatollah. We have 7 Grand Ayatollahs in Iran, and this is kind of a council from which the next one is going to be elected. What we have here is the other thing which has to do with the apparatus. This is Sepa Pasdaran. Pasdaran is Revolutionary Guards. So if we follow the mere translation, we do talk about guys who first of all have to defend the revolution from within, make sure that no counter-revolutionaries are coming for or trying actually to do sort of a counter-attack and abolish the revolution. But this body is primed to look at the surroundings, and whenever there is a weak state, easy prey to capitalize on its weakness. This is the guy that, let's say, turned this whole thing into an industry of Iran actually capitalizing on Arab weak states. Let's put it in brackets, even though it is very, very important. Persians and Arabs are culturally speaking and historically sheer enemies, deep animosity. Look at the Gulf. I mean, I talked to you about that. Persian Gulf, Arab Gulf. You know that this is actually kind of an example to what I'm trying to say. This is Revolutionary Guards. Here, within it, there is a nukhba, like in Arabic, elite forces. In Persian, they are named Niroye Quds. What is Quds? Jerusalem, like Al-Quds Al-An in Arabic. Of course, these are two different languages, Persian and Arabic, but Niroye Quds is Jerusalem force. And Jerusalem force is the means with which or through which to let Iran becoming a hegemon in the Middle East. This guy actually has been working on that until 2020, when the Americans actually assassinated him in Iraq. This is Haj Qasem Soleimani. The guy who replaced him is Ismail Kahani. You know, everybody has a substitute or replacement, but this guy was very, very instrumental, because he came not only with the operative skills, but also he knew how to handle this whole machinery and to work in tandem with the Ayatollahs. If I would try to make a long story short and show you what happened here, this is what happened. Okay, we don't have too much time, but Iran is the most cunning, very shrewd, highly sophisticated, and the most naive mistake one could do while dealing with Iran, either diplomatically or militarily, is to have kind of an understanding or feeling that he is sort of superior and the Iranians are inferior in many, many other aspects or things. What we do see here is, this is Tehran. You know, many Arabs would name actually this phenomenon as the Iranian or Akhtabut. Akhtabut in Arabic is an octopus. This is the head of the octopus. All these arrows, once again, are due to find or to capitalize on an easy prey. Let's just take the first one of which in the 80s, that was Lebanon. You are familiar with what Israelis call the First Lebanon War, 1982. Israelis were there to host the Palestinians that rocketed the Israeli north. And Israel put an end to Palestinian headquarters in the south of Lebanon, forcing them to find out a new Fatah land, which was to become Tunisia. Thereafter Oslo and back to Ramallah. But what the Revolutionary Guards used or capitalized on in this whole mess up in Lebanon, in order to install kind of a party which was named Party of God, Hezbollah. And here is the mechanism. When I have a state that from the beginning was based on a very twisted socio-demographic composition, when the state actually is become autoimmunic, so to speak, and starts struggling, you know, in itself, what the Revolutionary Guards, Quds Force, Jerusalem Force is doing is to nurture and support and equip the Shi'i component in a very sick state where you have a melange of ethnic types and religious types. Here, Shiites in Lebanon, of course, for years, functioned as second best. When Iran actually started to invest in them, just to make a long story short, Hezbollah became the dominant power in a very weak state. The chaos is still there. But the Iranians are so shrewd and cunning, they are not coming up with kind of a program by which to solve out the problems of Lebanon. They are managing the chaos by having a proxy which is much more stronger than anybody else in this sick state named Lebanon. Lebanon was basically Switzerland of the Middle East 65 years ago. If I would go to the 2003, this would be Iraq. You know that. Now it depends actually whether are you coming with me to that arrow while having kind of a Western suit or Middle Eastern suit. Western suit, very nice. We have come to Iraq not only to demolish the platforms of Islamic radicalism, I'm just quoting the Americans, but mainly to create a new direction through which Iraq, in the final analysis, is going to become not less than Western-style democracy. This is a very nice music. You know, you would like actually to believe in it. But let's just deal with the other street. How the toppling of Saddam Hussein, professional murderer, but Sunni, who was the most, I would say, bitter rival of Iran, and held basically this border by which not to let Iran move straight forward. This is why Iran had to do the quantum leap forward to Lebanon. You see that? Because here, Saddam Hussein was very, very bold in his bid to, let us say, block Iran and to save the Arab world. What Saddam Hussein actually used while dealing with that, he talked about, this is our Arab qal'ah. Qal'ah is a fortress, and we have to prevent the Persians or the Iranians coming for us. So basically what happened in 2003 with the Americans in Baghdad, this border has become very, very vulnerable, very, very easy to be invaded. And once again, to make a long story short, Iran is very, very prominent nowadays in Iraq, sorry. You can have Syria. 10 years ago or more than that, the Arab Spring. This was another reason why actually to come to Syria and capitalize on that. In the end of the day, what we got here is sort of a continuum. which is controlled by Iran from the Gulf to the Mediterranean. You see here states, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, in my opinion, these are not states. Those states are not able to control themselves by themselves. If we are going actually to get to the nitty-gritty details of their composition, we would see how many territorial slices are being swallowed up by even the Turks when it comes to Syria, Israel when it comes to Golan Heights, and of course Iran, which is very, very important and dominant here, and not forget the Russians here in Latakia and Tartus, the port cities in the eastern flank of the Mediterranean. Patience, consistency, shrewdness, cunningness. This is exactly what Iran is doing. And if you can't read it, you will lose. Because there are always actually several items Iran is throwing into the region that makes you, if you are actually tilted into sort of a naivete, to be the guy who snoozing and losing. Okay, so first of all, you have to have 100% full awareness who you are facing, who you are coping with. These guys have thousands of years of great history of fame. They were an empire. And when we look at that, actually, we have to take it into account. In Persian, there is an idiom said, Tamaduni Buzorg. Tamaduni Buzorg is high civilization. This is how Persians or Iranians do look at the others. Everybody is inferior. Azeris, Kurds, Baluchis, etc. And the most would be the Arabs. In my opinion, this is something which we have to grasp, because this is part and parcel of the socio-demographic composition of the Middle East. And if you are trying actually to better your interest and you are a little bit creative, you should and could do something with that in order to improve your stances when it comes to a very, very or ever-changing Middle East. Who is the other enemy of Iran in the Middle East? Saudi Arabia. Let's look at Saudi Arabia. This is the big, gigantic territory here, the white. Sorry? What Emirates? Emirates. Emirates are here. But we look at Saudi Arabia, I mean, territorially speaking, it's a giant. Of course, most territories are deserty. But let's just make sure we understand Saudi Arabia is a Wahhabi state. One would say actually maybe the strictest Sunni school. But Iran, of course, is Shia. This is kind of a thing that would show you what Iran is doing. Iran is pointing out who the enemies are. Israel is here. You can see that very loud and clear. The notion is to envelope your rival with a fire ring. Fire ring. This is what Israel is suffering from today. But the same goes to Saudi Arabia. Because if I put my head here on the ceiling, we would see that. And if we go back down, we're going to get Yemen, another state which seems to go into oblivion, a permanent bloody civil war. In Yemen you have many, many species. It's not only Shia, Zaidi, and Sunnis. You have many, many tribes. Part of it actually belongs today to Al-Qaeda. This is where actually Osama bin Laden family was originated. This is Hadramaut in biblical Hatsarmavet, Tankhit. But we have actually to get an idea. This is another state that is being, how to say, dismembered. And if you know actually how to deal with that cunningly, and Iran Revolutionary Guards, Quds Force definitely knows, Houthis here would become the new candidate of Iran to turn Yemen into their sort of fiefdom by which or from which to harass Saudi Arabia from two directions. Oh, so look at that. This is a map that shows you something which is very interesting. The greener actually territory is, the more Shi'is we have in it. This is of course Iran. Look at that. With 95% of the population Shiites. The only Sunnis are to be found here, nearby the border with Pakistan. These are Baluchis. And most of them act as kind of a very active opposition to the regime in Tehran. Look at the Persian cat. Do you see actually the cat's head here? This is his ears. This is a Persian cat. But the head is full of Azeris. Azeris are Shiites, but of Turkmenic origin, not Persian. Why do I delve into too many details? I don't want you actually to just carefully listen and remember actually who is who. I'm just giving you an idea about how convoluted the forest is. Once you understand that, you know that it would be a grave mistake to have kind of a model being brought to either Ireland or Panama to be implemented in this region. This is why actually we are trying to make sure that we can map them out, that we are definitely aware of the complications. And once we have that, we can definitely move ahead. In Islamic terms, what happened here in 2003 is a disaster. Why? Because Iran, after Saddam had been ousted by the Americans, got sort of an access to go for the Arabs. And not only that, Shiites are coming in order to create sort of a Shi'i hegemony in the region. I mean, in those years you can find many, many Arab states and others depicting this whole thing as al-Khatar al-Shi'i, which means the Shi'i threat. Israelis think that they have invented those two words in Hebrew. It is called ha'iyum, ha-Shi'i, but actually the prerogative should be delivered or given to the Arabs who actually start talking about a Shiite crescent. You know, this region actually is well known in history as the Fertile Crescent. This is what we got now. Of course, Yemen is another territory to the point, and this is what it is. Now, the 7th of October enabled Iran to use these proxies for the first time in tandem, in kind of a theater that would perform the ring fire, as I said before, against Israel or against any other enemy. And Iran basically got kind of an opportunity to create something which is becoming very, very dangerous, not only for Israel, but for many, many Arab states in this region that would like actually to have or to foster a different future for themselves and for the region. This is Iraq. This is Syria. This is Lebanon. All these spots basically point to or stand for Iranian facilities all over the place, from the Gulf to the Mediterranean. I'm talking about, logistic bases, missile headquarters, and a lot of stuff that would say that here we have a Shi'i proxy that would help Iran out in bolstering its dominance. The Shi'i proxy is named Al-Hashd al-Sha'bi. Translation, the popular gathering, a conglomerate of Shiite militias who basically mend them. It is basically comprised of local Shi'is. Iran is not sending Shi'i troops. Look how cunning and shrewd these guys are. They are not sending ranks and file. What you can find in Lebanon or in Iraq or in Yemen or in Syria, to some extent even in Sudan, is Revolutionary Guards, functionaries who do function as guides, as trainers, but definitely not as ranks and file. And this is very, very important. This is Hashd Sha'bi. Here in Syria, all the east, Deir az-Zor, Al-Mayadin, Al-Bukamal, all these places are the base or the home of many, many pro-Iranian militias, which are based on locals, Shiites or Alawites, but also on some imported Shiites from either Afghanistan and Pakistan. I hope you can just follow me, because this is something which is very, very sophisticated. Of course, in Yemen you have the Houthis, in Lebanon Hezbollah. So we have kind of an orchestra by which Iran, for the first time, has managed to create a theater which is unheard of, definitely, when it comes to Israel. And we are in it now. Just look at the Houthis. This is Yemen. Just giving that as an example. This is Yemen. Actually, the red spot is Sa'da. Sa'da is the northeast province in Yemen. This is Sana'a, the capital city. And think of Shi'i, Zaydis. Well, we won't delve into too many details about that, but this is kind of 6th or 7th branch of Shi'ism. Zaydis, who feel sort of predicament because they are being haunted by Saudis who'd like them to become Sunnis. And on the other side, they are deprived of almost everything, socio-economically speaking, when it comes to Sana'a. They just raised a banner of SOS. who are going to help us. And they found their savior. Revolutionary Guards, more accurately actually, Jerusalem Force is going to turn those guys into what they have become. This is the Sa'da Valley. Those are the Houthis. And here they are. Look at their t-shirts. What is written here in Arabic? موت لأمريكا, موت لإسرائيل. You know what is that? Yeah? اللعنة على اليهود. Look at that. By the way, Hania's funeral happened actually 2 hours ago in Tehran. And what was, you think, actually the most populous cry there? Mark bar America, Mark bar Israel. Okay? So, what we have here is Shi'i, Iranian indoctrination being translated into Arabic, and those guys in Yemen are becoming the lost brothers of people in Gaza, Palestinians. They're Shia, definitely. The only exception to the rule, let's go back to this map.
Could you translate from the Arabic into the English for us? We're a little bit slow.
What, sorry?
Some of the slogans, please, from Arabic.
Death to America and death to Israel. You know, I have to just remind you, those guys have developed an industry about how to treat Israel, how to refer to Israel. And basically they are referring to Israel, and I said that before, as kind of a byproduct of Western capitalism. So if I would take Khomeini's words in his almighty book before the revolution that was written in exile, he explains, not in so many words, that the world should be divided into two. This is very Zoroastrian. Dark and light. Good and bad. Deprived of everything and the usurpers. Shiites are the deprived of everything. The others are the usurpers. Some of them might be Sunnis, by the way. But in order to understand that, he stands to argue that the world is being controlled by diabolic forces, satanic forces. How do you say in Persian, Satan? Shaitan. America was to be depicted as Shaitan Buzurg. What is Shaitan Buzurg? Great Satan. Now, if you come up with that kind of a differentiation, you might ask yourself, okay, show me the little Satan. Where the little Satan is, Shaitanic Kuchik, that would be Israel. This makes life for the bad guys a lot easier because they don't have to really explain and get into details why these forces should be recognized as the ultimate evil. And this is something which goes all the way. When you ask me about those slogans, this is, you know, when you say America, you have to say Israel. I mean, these are basically the axis of evil, if you want. Okay, so we are here. These are the Houthis. This is it. Allahu Akbar. Al-Nasr al-Islam. This is green because this is positive. Al-Maut li-America, Al-Maut li-Israel, Al-La'na ala al-Yahud. And this is something those guys actually are echoing day by day. The remaining Jews in Yemen actually were out of Yemen. There are no Jews in Yemen nowadays because when they came to power, those guys, they implemented basically many I would say policies that would be more than welcome when it comes to Iran. Look at what they did to Saudi Arabia. These are basically the place of, let us say, the richest oil fields in the world. And there was sort of a co-production by Iranian militias in Iraq and the Houthis, and both of them basically bombarded or attacked the oil fields here in Al-Buqaiq and nearby the Gulf in Saudi Arabia, what Saudi Arabia actually understood as sort of a 9/11, because when the Saudis were waiting for the Americans, as was the case in the 20th century, if somebody is daring attack an oil field in the Gulf, America was there in the 20th century, but not in that time. What the Saudis have forcefully learned is that the set of priorities of the United States was changing. And we can understand that. After Afghanistan, after Iraq, no boots on the ground, this fatigue. We don't want actually to mess up with the Middle East anymore because it comes to nothing. We know actually what it is about. Here, what the Saudis were to have is Houthis, Jama'at al-Houthi, this is how they call themselves in Arabic, or they are being depicted by other Arabs, was rocketing day by day Saudi Arabia, as is the case with Gaza envelope in Israel. So Saudis definitely know what does that mean to be harassed by Iranian proxies. The only Shi'i proxy we can talk about are two tiny ones in Gaza. In Gaza, there are no Shiites. But Iran thought that it would pay off to support both Hamas and Islamic Jihad. Sunni, though, because they sit back to back too. Israel, and they took an oath from their early days to fight till the end against Israel in order to annihilate it. For Iran, this pays off. You are going to support those two Sunni proxies here and create a real firing which envelopes Israel in kind of a way that is, as I said before, unheard of. Let's go back to where we were. Okay. Look at the Red Sea. This is very important when you deal with Yemen. We talked about Sa'da, which is the northern province. But remember, with the Houthis becoming the dominant player in Yemen, they went southwards almost to Bab el-Mandab Straits. Here, they are very strong here in a port city named Al-Hudaydah, and they actually inflicted an economic blow to the international sea lanes and the international economy. Look at that. I mean, if I would like to show you that, it's just, this is the way actually I'm doing, coming from the east here with my merchandise, whatsoever it is, Indian Ocean, Bab el-Mandab, Suez Canal, and the Mediterranean, Italy, France, Spain, and if I would like to have London, through Gibraltar, okay? If Bab el-Mandab is blocked, you have to have a bypass. And the bypass brings you back to what history actually tells us about the Cape of the Good Hope. See that? This is much, much longer away. And products are becoming very, very pricey because of the maintenance, because of what is needed to have this whole circle. So, Beirut, Damascus, Baghdad, Sana'a, these are 4 capital cities, Arab, who came to be controlled to a large extent by Iranian proxies. Israel actually killed this guy, Mahdavi, who was a very, very prominent leader in the Jerusalem force. It happened in Al-Mazz quarter in Damascus here. Iran have realized that this is kind of a real attack on its sovereignty. And basically Iran came up with a missile attack on Israel. Fortunately, Israel basically, when it comes to air defense system, is very, very well advanced with a very elaborated system. So, you know, the damage was meager, but basically Iran proved that from now on, hundreds of missiles that would go as far as 2,000 kilometers, which in a way could be actually the distance between Iran and some states in Western Europe. This is not the sort of, you know, kind of a dream. This is a real or mere reality. This is what Israel did. Here, this is Natanz. Israel attacked Natanz and proved that, at least when it comes to air defense system, Iran is pretty vulnerable. And to penetrate actually its system of air defense, Israel is able. But this was not enough, and this is why we are here in kind of a real problem. This guy is Ismail Haniyeh. Once again, we are going back to Hamas because he was taking part in the inauguration ceremony or whatever of the new elected president in Iran, Pezeshkian. You know, actually, that the former president was found in his death in a plane accident or whatever. But this is Haniyeh. He's the head of the political arm of Hamas. Used to sit in Qatar with his sons, built up kind of an empire of gold, Jews, a lot of money, together with other friend Khalid Mash'al that is going to replace him now as the head of the political arm. And I won't talk too much about that, but the guy actually was there to praise the new elected president of Iran. He was stayed in a very, very well-protected complex of the Revolutionary Guards, and somebody killed him. Now what we do hear from New York Times is that it was not a missile, as was told in the beginning. I mean, there was kind of a very, very deep penetration there. And of course, when it comes to Iran, they have to ask themselves who, how, and what we should do now before we are getting to the next stage. And I leave it to you because this is a very psychological warfare. You have to deliver the message to the other side that he should not mess up with you. It's very difficult. And you should do that in kind of a way that would be very persuasive when it comes to the other. Let's talk about the Americans now. This is Saudi Arabia. This is what we hope for Israel and the Middle East. We do talk about normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel. See that? These states are United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. This is India here. This is what they call I2U2 in order to create something that would compensate the Americans of many, many losses in terms of economy and influence to the Chinese. Look at the Chinese. This is the road and belt strategy. They are everywhere, literally, but they do swallow up actually many slices, economically speaking. They are not coming up with army. They tend actually to stand in the sidelines when it comes to diplomacy, even if they were the interlocutors between Iran and Saudi Arabia several months ago, and now between Hamas and Fatah. They would like actually to perform diplomatically, but they are very, very prudent and careful. And basically, when it comes to that stuff, economically speaking, they manage to swallow up a lot of slices which makes a difference, which make a difference. This is China. This is the Middle East. And of course, this is the Mediterranean. Nostra Mare. If you remember, this is how actually the Romans depicted the Mediterranean. So everybody is having kind of a thinking that it would be very, very useful for him to have that too. Ali Khamenei, on the 7th of October, three weeks ago, the 7th of October should be regarded as a harsh saying by which to preempt normalization. Normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel. Both enemies of Iran. What if, let us say that we have normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel. Okay, so green, Egypt and Jordan, they have peace treaties with Israel. You know, many would complain in Israel and beyond that this is a cold peace, but this is what we have to have in mind. We are not hunting or chasing the wind. We wouldn't like end up, I mean, I wish we could, but this is not the target or the aim. How much he loves me, how much he likes me? No. Convergence of interest. Convergence of interest. Egypt and Jordan, peace treaty. Morocco in orange. Sudan, which is a very controversial case. Saudi Arabia and tiny Bahrain, they do have normalization agreement with Israel a la the Abraham Accords. Now, put this giant here, Saudi Arabia, and I hope that Oman will follow suit because both states are looking at the problem here, which is Yemen. Look at what you get here. Arab bloc. Many Arab states who are pro-Western, geopolitically speaking, because they'd rather have an American or European backup against problems coming from rivals, especially Iran. most of them, I exclude Qatar here because this is a very controversial case study, but all of them are anti-Iranians, simply afraid of Iranians. Do not trust them. These guys actually would like Iran to be blocked by an alliance, by big brothers, as was the case before with the United States in the 20th century. But all these states are also anti-Muslim brothers. This is very interesting. For them, Hamas is a pariah. Pariah. We can look at the policy of Saudi Arabia against Muslim brothers in the recent 20 years to understand. You know, in Arabic we say barra, out of Saudi Arabia. We don't want you here if you turn your religion into kind of political device. And those states, to a large extent, of course, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and even Jordan, even if this is very, very complicated there, they would love hearing the news that Hamas has become a history. Not ideologically, because the idea would be there, but a history in terms of his political and military functions in Gaza. So they pray that Israel actually would succeed in that mission. They can't actually come with that to the open because this would be politically incorrect, of course. They are still Muslims and Arabs, but we have to take it into account. You know, I was there where this thing actually was compiled in Abu Dhabi. This is the Abrahamic city. I was there in the inauguration. Each one of these buildings stands for an institution that is very, very dear to each one of the monotheist religions: mosque, synagogue, and church. This is the Abrahamic city in Abu Dhabi. And you know what? When you go through the educational system of Abu Dhabi, you do believe and understand that things can be changed. But if the educational system is educating young people, as I said before, to respect the otherness of the other, to understand that there are other people in the world. It's not me and nothing more. To become familiar, acquainted with the other culture, with the other people. This is basically what this state is preaching for. And the bond between Israel and this state are still very strong, because in the end of the day, these states would love actually many states to come together and cooperate, not only when it comes to the geopolitical stuff, but mainly when it comes to the challenges of the 21st century. And I talked to you shortly about that: ecology, economy, renewable energies, water, desertification. And believe me, I've been there actually too many a time. The sky is the limit. Sky is the limit. But this won't happen all over the Middle East as long as the bad guys, Hamas, Hezbollah and company, and Iran behind of them, are still dictating a very negative rhythm for the Middle East. So this is why actually we have to work together for that. I don't know what's the time, Charles, but maybe we should just turn into a discussion. Okay, thank you.
Uzi, thank you, really thank you, and I agree with most what you have said, but there is one observation and one question. One observation, as a matter of fact, when I look at Iran, from the perspective of United States, we have a weak sense of geography and history, because Iran did not create the problem there. As a matter of fact, Iran exploited the Iran there. In Syria, a minority rule. In Iraq, Shia more than Sunni, and Saddam Hussein rule. And when it came to Zaidi, as a matter of fact, it's a very extremely important point. The Zaidi dogmatically and ideologically were close to Sunni than Shia 12 Islam. You know what I mean? So really, it's mistake. And really, when I was a researcher for the government, I saw that research and I felt so bad sometimes. So this is on one thing, and I worry about myself. And let me tell you what I worry. In case that regime changed, what kind of a regime we're gonna have next? This is my biggest worry.
Iran.
But yes, in Iran. Now, this is my question, and I know, and I am, as a matter of fact, I am hopeful you will have normalization with Saudi Arabia. But also I have concern, because when I look at the region myself, I see your neighborhood, our neighborhood, let me put it this way, you know what I mean? Egypt and Jordan, they are different than Saudi Arabia. What happened in the world globally? Now the world is split between global north and global south, and Saudi Arabia today is no longer a regional actor. Today, Saudi Arabia is an international actor that's gonna extract a lot of dividends from United States. So mainly now it depends on the cost. And myself, I'll go further also, and this is what and this is a question. You know what I mean? What you have for intelligence cooperation, especially with Jordan and Egypt, I am worried about the extent to which that normalization with Israel will lead to, and what kind of security framework that Saudi Arabia will work to, but how will act upon. How will act upon, because I think the Saudis are gonna be in the middle, they're gonna follow their own interest first and foremost. And this is what I will have, and this is my question. Thank you, Charles, really thank you.
I fully agree with you. You know, every state, as we said before, after 1967 and beyond, is basically for itself. This is why we say Al-Urdun awalan, Saudiya awalan, which is Saudi first, Jordan first, etc. But I have to tell you, okay. So I have to tell you that, listen, if we look at the map, you know, I see what you mean, and there is a real concern about Egyptian army, which is becoming much more bigger than ever and highly well equipped. But let me tell you that, and this is my take. First of all, never say never. So you have to be very suspicious when it comes to that, definitely. But, you know, the problems of water coming from Ethiopia. Israel is there, sort of a negotiator. This is a big problem for Egypt. Egypt is so poor a country that I can't see Abdel Fattah al-Sisi gives up on so many advantages that this peace treaty still provides Egypt. It is almost impossible. Well, Jordan, you know, we have a lot of what? You know, solaric energy, water, etc. But here comes the thing. When there was an attack of Iran on Israel, and all these missiles were to hit Israel, but on their way, they flew over Jordan. Who do you think actually Jordan cooperated with? You know, I mean, we say there are words, palabras. You know, people can talk a lot about Israel. So you can find kind of an absurding theater where the prime minister of Jordan would name Israel a Nazi society, would even go as far as to depict Netanyahu as Hitler. But the day after, when Iran coming with a bunch of missiles, it is well known, you know, it is sort of a tacit agreement. When it comes to existential stuff, we know you, you know us, we're gonna be together. And you know what? I tell you that. I have to show that in the map, Charles. Sorry for that. Once again. Maybe I said that before. I don't know. But look at Jordan. Jordan is here. Here is Jordan. What Iran is trying to do, I told you that before, yeah? To topple the monarchy in Jordan. Look at that. If Jordan is becoming kind of a place which is being swept by radical Shiism or whatever from Iraq and Syria, West Bank or Judea and Samaria is exposed to Iranian manipulations. And this is inside Israel. So if you ask me, I think that there is a coalition that would definitely stand to the simple dimension of preserving the monarchy in Jordan. And, you know, I agree with you, but we have to be very, very careful. Fully agree. We have to find out a way to do that. Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, there is a huge cooperation with Israel when it comes to the intel, when it comes to, you know, military stuff. And once again, if you know how to give and take, and this is what Israel doesn't know. Now Israel is learning how to act in the Middle Eastern bazaar. This is something Israel hasn't got a clue about. And I was very, very, you know, I was very, very shocked to see how huge is the gap between what I can provide in terms of technology, etc., and how little my experience is when it comes to how to negotiate. A negotiation in the Middle East is not a negotiation in the West. This is a totally different opera that must be carefully learned and be internalized in order to get kind of other achievements.
Cool. Uzi, two quick points. We were talking about the peace with Egypt. There were reports during this recent war with Hamas in Gaza that there was American weapons found in Gaza. I don't know if it's true. If it's true, is this corruption from the Egyptian side? How did they end up there?
Yeah.
And then also, can you comment on the last 2 days, 48 hours? Iran and Lebanon, things are very fluid. What's your reading of what's going to happen?
Well,
the
I
next
mean,
phase?
I was following actually Nasrallah's speech. He speaks highly, but the subtext is very important. I think that Iran wouldn't like to get sort of an overall escalation in the region. United States neither. And because of that, actually, Hezbollah and Iran are trying to compile kind of a harsher response than before, but to calibrate something that wouldn't get sort of a negative spillover to sort of an overall war. But you know, after having said that, we are in a war zone and miscalculations could be, you know, easily bring us to a slippery slope. What was your first story? Egypt, yeah, Egypt turned a blind eye. Of course, corruption and a lot of stuff. Listen, Egypt tried.
It was Sisi's son?
No, first of all, actually, when Morsi was there, this whole, you know, caravans and let us say industry that was to go from Egypt to Gaza was flourishing. When Sisi actually came, he tried actually to just, you know, to cut it off. But basically, he found himself in a real problem with tribes, Bedouin in Sinai, that gave him kind of a very, very hard time to the Egyptian army. he got Al-Qaeda, no, not Al-Qaeda, ISIS fighters there in Sinai, and tribes of Sinai, together with ISIS activists, became sort of a syndicate of crime and smuggling drugs. And you know what Sisi said, or was forced to say, if you can't beat them, join them. So what we had there is sort of an industry of bribery that was performed by many, many Egyptian policemen. But we know actually today it was a mistake of Israel not to be there, at least in the Gazan side. And it was definitely deserted, and this is what happened in the end.
Thank you, Uzi, for your excellent analysis. You have partially answered my question, but I would still like to come back to it, and that's the question of Jordan and strenuous but strategically important collaboration between Israel and Jordan. My question is, to what lengths do you think that the two countries would be willing to go to protect one another? Let's say the Jordanian king would be directly threatened. Do you think that the Israelis would intervene?
Yeah, there is a history.
Thank you.
And it's a very good question. You know, I think that both sides would make the most of it in order to just go together in that path. In my opinion, this is the common wisdom of many, many moderate Arab states, especially when it comes to US. And if you ask me, this is one of the pillars on which a regional alliance, anti-Iranian, anti-Hamas, which comprised Israel and Arab states, and be supported by Western Europe and the US, generally speaking, this is what I see in order to start thinking of a different Middle East. You know, we have to marginalize extremists. We can't do that one by one. If we would like to have a better future in this region, we have to come up with kind of an alliance that would be very, very, I would say, keep to its promise to, you know, deal with those extremists whenever they are, Sunni or Shi'i, because otherwise we can't go together to the 21st century in a very, very effective manner. There are many challenges, and states should deal with them. What these bad guys are doing, they prevent those good guys in the region to start something fresh, good for the next generations. So in my opinion, this is the common wisdom. If you ask me whether it would be there or not, I do think that to a large extent, this is what we're gonna see when we are dealing with the geopolitical architecture of the Middle East. I do see that. But to what extent, actually, this is something which is definitely remains to be seen.
Yes.
Hold on.
Sorry.
My question is more about the semantics, which is, in my field, international law is crucial. You mentioned Hezbollah and Houthis, but why don't we say Lebanon and Yemen? Because a terrorist organization operating from a country's sovereign territory is not a separate entity. I mean, last week, last Shabbat, last Saturday, we marked the deadliest attack on Israeli civilians since October 7th, not even Jews. And I think that Lebanon bears the responsibility, not Hezbollah, because they're allowing them to flourish.
Yeah, that's a good question, but for the sake, you know, for the sake of our presentation, I introduced Lebanon and Yemen as what they call failed states. By the way, this is kind of a term which is being used by Arab sociologists. Dawla fashila. What does that mean? Failed state. Fashla, yeah. So, this is for one. Now, if you ask me, this is exactly what Israel should do. For some reason, Israel is not allowed to, maybe by the US or by itself, But I would go, as was the case with Yemen, Israel attacked Al-Hudaydah port, Al-Hudaydah city, when the Houthis actually were sending their device to Tel Aviv. When you are hitting civilian infrastructures, you are punishing the hosted state. Now, the hosted state was not so happy with the coming to the fore of the Trojan horse, namely Hezbollah in Lebanon, Houthis in Yemen. But the hosted state was, as I said before, failed state, very open and very, very vulnerable, and this was used by that. So if you ask me, Israel should adopt this language. I do believe in that. But for some reason, you know, Israel is a democracy. You are going to learn what international law, and you know that democracies actually have to just, you know, keep line with the international law, whether here or there. And there are many, many limitations. If you ask me, if Israel would like to shorten it up, if Israel would like actually the world start dealing with that in kind of a very effective way, it is not Hezbollah. Lebanon will suffer. Nobody would like actually to kill civilians or to murder civilians, chas v'chalila. But if I'm going actually to hit state infrastructures that has to do with electricity, water, etc., the world would have to deal with that in a different manner. Now, I don't know if that would happen, but I fully agree with you, your differentiation. It is definitely Lebanon, Yemen, Iraq, Syria. But we'll have to see actually how things are going to be played out.
Uzi, so one of the prerogatives of the circle of the Abraham Accords, which would be the agreement between normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel, is obviously, I mean, in the narratives have been until now and since then, the resolution of the Palestinian state. Obviously, October 7 have made recalibrate this equation, even though they keep this narrative, and the resolution of a Palestinian state question is farther from realization than ever. So in your estimation, since we're talking about this, the completion of the circle with Saudi Arabia, what is the recalibration in the Arabian side after October 7? What needs to happen?
Regarding the Palestinian state. Yes. Okay. Look, when I'm talking about Iran, we do say sarcastically that they are going to fight against Israel until the last Palestinian. When we do talk about Saudi Arabia, Iran will fight Saudi Arabia until the last Yemenite. So just to give you an idea about that. Now, the Saudis are anxious. They are bewildered because they see Iran goes nuclear. They don't see Americans like Nixon and Kissinger. What they see now is, you know, Democrats and Trump. What they would like to have is kind of a staunch American ally that would back them up. For that, they would agree to whatever actually the Americans would argue them to do. But basically what they need from the Americans is a go-ahead or green light for starting to develop nuclear capacity of their own. There is no chance state like Saudi Arabia is going to function in the Middle East where Iran went nuclear. If you talk to Saudis about that, it is not that Iran is going to annihilate Saudi Arabia, but they will tell you, the Iranians, after having become a nuclear state, they're gonna torture us diplomatically, economically, geopolitically. They know it. They know it better than the Americans and the Europeans.
So basically they're
they are waiting for Trump, but they might get Kamala Harris, I don't know. They are praying, actually, that Trump would be the next president, because they don't, it's not that they have something against somebody, but basically they don't like Democrats when it comes to the policy of the Americans in the Middle East. They don't believe in that. This is my take. It is the impression I got after many, many years in the Gulf. And basically, this is something that is the back of mind of the Saudis. Yeah.
For American certainty.
Yes.
Two questions, Uzi. Thank you for
Yes.
your presentation. What factors have to come together in order for a regime change to happen in Iran? And what are your thoughts on the former prince who lives in Washington? And what is Turkey's role in this Balakan?
Yeah. So, it's my take. Once again, this is what I think. I don't know if this will be adopted by somebody, but first of all, look at Iran. 50% of Iran are Persians. 50% of the population, that's the whole thing. 85 million people in Iran. 45 million out of them are Persians. What the others are? Everything. Azeris, Baluchis, Kurds, Arabs. Just kind of an idea. I suggested that to some policymakers, but this, for them, actually, is sort of far-fetched. Proxies? Iran is doing, actually, firing proxies to you, to Saudi Arabia. Why won't we actually do the same on the other side? Just an idea. In my opinion, if you are going to prevent Iran from becoming nuclear, it's chasing the wind. It's too late. Iran will go nuclear. Period. Why? They are there. It depends on them now. What the West should do is to change actually the whole policy to what I would call regime change. And regime change is not just kind of one shot. You have to come up with a very, very well detailed strategy. You have to deal with that by first of all dealing with economic sanctions and then proxies. And then, of course, when you have kind of a protest within Iran, you have to support it from the out. Now, the prince, Iran won't get back to monarchy. The Middle East tells us when a king is toppled, there is no restoration. No restoration of kingdoms in the Middle East. In the Arab Middle East, and I think that Iran includes it. So, when people ask me actually, where are the supporters of the Shah? They live in New York and Los Angeles. They are not in Iran. Just remember, most population in Iran, they even don't know who the Shah was. They didn't experience a monarchical rule. What we should actually hope in Iran, that in a certain stage, as was the case with Iranian history, many revolutions, here we're going to have a kind of a gathering of people of the economy, students, and other, to come up with something that would turn Iran into something which is not monarchical, not Islamic Republic, but in the middle of the road solution, I would say. It could be many, many things. But remember, in Iran 1905, there was a constitutional revolution. Islamic Revolution 79. But this is the exception to the rule because nobody thought from the beginning that clerics are going to take control. They always actually have been there, but got back to the mosques. This time, this is what happened, but we have to work on that. We have to just calibrate the kind of a very, very well-detailed program because Iran is the problem. Iran is the problem. For all means and purposes, Iran is the problem. You know, look at what's going on in the United States. Even the CIA came up with a report that Iran is behind this, behind that, and they are very, very cunning, very, very shrewd. As I said before, they know how to play the social networks, cyber stuff, and they are, I mean, the advancement they are coming up with is pretty impressive. So if you would like to cope with that, you have to invest in it. You have to have the more partners you can actually enlist to this mission. If you are not going to do that, the West is going to lose. To lose. And it won't take too much time now because we already have the platform in the United States and Europe. I do hope that this will happen, but we'll have to wait and see. Well, this is another story that look at what Erdogan is doing. Once again, look at Turkey and Iran. Both of them, in the aftermath of the First World War, were states that challenged theocracy. They went against religion. Both Ataturk, Mustafa Kemal in Turkey, and of course Reza Khan. And Reza Khan actually was looking at Ataturk as kind of a model to be followed. What was the name of the game there? Islam, religion is out of politics, totally. In both Iran and Turkey. When you are coming up with that dramatic essay, you're going to pay for that. In the Middle East, state and religion should become two sides of the same coin. It's very, very difficult. But if you are not going to do that way, if you are going to secularize your state like the Shah actually tried to do with the 1963 revolution, like Ataturk did in Turkey, you're going to get a backlash from religion in the end of the day. And look what happened. Iran and Turkey became Islamic republics in the end of the day. For Israel, the bad guys were the Arabs, and now they became kind of, you know, states to cooperate with. In the beginning, the good guys for Israel were Turkey, Iran, Ethiopia. When I was in school, when I said why it is that, Arabs are bad. Non-Arabs are good. Would you like to have an indication? Turkey, Iran, Ethiopia. So looks how, you know, our ever-changing region, the Middle East, can change things in no time. But I agree with you. Turkey is just trying to find kind of a real place. What Erdogan is doing is a very dangerous game. He comes up with, you know, vitriolic language against Israel and stuff. And of course, he's playing the cards that way to become, you know, very, very dominant in the Middle East. There is kind of a concealed rivalry between him and Iran. And it is very complicated too. But Erdogan is to be found in the north of Iraq, in the north of Syria, in the east, what is that? In Azerbaijan, in a way. You can find them actually all the way. I mean, those two states, I mean, it's very important, Charles, sorry for that. Those two states are giants, Iran and Turkey. Let's say that you are going through Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Dagestan. You would see people actually speak either variant of Farsi or variant of Turkish. Those actually were empires. And they were looking eastwards throughout history. Now, unfortunately, their eyes are lying westwards on the Arab Middle East and Israel, and this is becoming something which actually is very, very problematic in our region, the Middle East. Yes, please.
So we're over time, but we're gonna take one more quick question. We have to end like in a minute.
It's actually just in the same vein as the last question, which had to do with regime change, which is just to point out, to build on what you just said, that the Iranian regime seems very powerful in what you just presented, but in fact, as an authoritarian regime that seems extremely unpopular in the own country, we have seen that those kinds of governments can be toppled from one day to the next. We saw that happening in Eastern Europe and with the Soviet Union, that they seemed impermeable, they seemed
But these guys,
invincible, and then it turned. You actually watched in Romania the crowd turn against Ceausescu in real time, and the guy who'd been in power for 40 years had to run out the back door. So the fact...
Ceausescu didn't have bargaining chips. What the Iranians are doing with this map, they have bargaining chips everywhere. So they could actually intimidate the West, intimidate
I'm
Europe.
not trying to argue with you. I'm just saying that authoritarian regimes are often more fragile than they appear. And the idea of there being regime change without a foundation, as we had in Iraq, we went in there, created regime change, and then had no plan B.
Let's give Uzi the final word, and we really need
That's
to
it.
wrap it up.
I agree with you. But listen, half the population Iran is being fed by the regime. Okay? You have army of the young people called Basij. You have Pasdaran. They know how to control with kind of a very, very cruel and effective apparatus. That's first. Second, if there is kind of an upheaval that it would kill people, smash them, they will nip it in the bud because they know that this is very dangerous. What they hold all the way there is, as I said before, many bargaining chips, and they know if somebody is going to attack Iran, they are going to just operate the theater. This is what they have in mind, and everybody has to take it into consideration. This is actually what happened when the West was trying to create kind of an agreement with Iran. You can't do agreements with such people. They are so cunning. They are going actually in the end of the day to become nuclear. Sooner or later. And this is what happens now. When Western states were fighting each other, whose policy is more effective regarding the agreement, Iran actually had done quite an advancement when it comes to that. So, I mean, listen, what can I tell? I mean, I think that my discipline basically should be, brought in, our discipline, in order to make, at least in Israel, as I said before, this is what we are trying to do. Young people, young students, we would like them actually to have Middle Eastern experience, but not only when it comes to theories, language, meeting people of the Middle East, have kind of an idea of how to combine theory with praxis. If we're going to have Israelis like that, I think that we have done quite a job for the future of our country. And this is what I hope. Thank you.
Susie, really, thank you very much. And, there's a lot of questions. I'm sorry I didn't get to everybody. When you speak, you can hear a pin drop, and there was a lot more questions. So thank you for being here. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Just really quickly, everybody, we have the breakout session, same place that you've had it the last few days. And then Larry Amsel's resilience